Good morning, YouTube. In today's video, we're going to be developing some 4x5 black and white film. The point of this video is to show you just how easy it is to develop your own film right at home. Now you might say, okay Jim, it's easy to say that that's an easy process when you have an entire darkroom dedicated to film photography. And that's fair enough, but the process that I'm going to show you today is the same one that I was using years before I had a darkroom. I was doing this in a half bathroom with just a curtain taped over the door. You could even do this right in your kitchen sink. My wife always loved when I did that. We'll be using the SP-445 from Stearman Press, and this is a fantastic product. And the people at Stearman Press are also fantastic. The customer service is great, and they're always very prompt at answering questions. This is a daylight tank, meaning that once you load the film, which does need to be done in complete darkness, the rest of the process can be done entirely in light. And this means that you can do this anywhere that you have access to a sink. Today, we'll be developing 2 sheets of Tmax 100. The SP-445 holds up to 4 sheets. The developer that we'll be using is Pyrocat HD by Photographer's Formulary. These are my favorite black and white stock and developer combo. Pyrocat HD is economical, it's easy to use, and it gives really great and repeatable results. Now, if you're watching this because you're thinking about getting into large format film, you should. Large format's the best. If you already shoot film, but you haven't dipped your toe into large format or aren't developing at home, I really hope that this video inspires you to give it a shot. If I ever lost the ability to develop my own film, I think I would stop shooting film altogether. To me, it's all a part of the process, and it's the process itself that caused me to fall in love with film photography. I love to shoot digital, but when I get home from shooting digital, post-processing is the worst part of photography. I absolutely hate it. With film, I love developing film, I love printing in the darkroom. All of it is a giant pain in the ass, but it's so much fun to me. I look forward to getting my film back to my house and working on creating an image. To me, when I pull a sheet of film from the developing tank, I get the same feeling I used to get when I was a kid and I would open a pack of cards, whether it's baseball cards or Pokemon cards or whatever it was. I would anxiously wait to see what I would come away with. The difference is that now every sheet I unload is $5 out of my pocket instead of my father's, so I'm a lot more disappointed when I get a bad image than when I used to get a bad set of cards. Anywho, that's enough jibber jabber. Let's go ahead and go over the equipment that we're going to be using today. Okay, here are all of our components of the SP-445 tank. We have our main tank, we have our baffle, and this is also going to help hold in the actual film slides. We have our 2 film holders. These are our light-proof baffles, and then we have the lid. And the lid has 2 sides, and you can see that there are ridges on the edge of the tank here. And there are matching ridges on the lid, which help us make sure that we're lining it up appropriately. Additionally, on top of the lid, you can see it says fill, drain, and vent. So when we're filling our chemicals, you loosen this lid, and this way the air can escape. And you would remove this lid and pour our chemistry and drain the chemistry from this hole here with the vent open. And then when we're ready to invert the lid, we just tighten both down. It has an O-ring seal to keep all of our chemistry inside. And then it also has this little visual indicator here, which is going to be very difficult to show. There's this little L shape, and when your chemistry reaches that, that's how you know that you've reached the top of the film. So this should be at about 475 milliliters. I usually fill to 500 just to be extra safe, because that's the only issue I've ever had with this tank, and it was user error. I didn't put in enough chemistry and the tops of my film did not develop properly. So I usually go just above this indicator here, and that's how I know that my film will get coated. Now these are our film holders. They're just like loading a 4x5 sheet holder. So you can see here where the tab is, you're going to have an opening and you're going to slide the film under the edges just like you would in a 4x5 holder, but I'll show you that process here shortly. But what I really love about this tank is it's a daylight tank, which means after you get the film loaded, you can have the lights on and it won't be an issue. And the way that's achieved is first you put in this holder here. Now that's going to serve to be a baffle, but also, see, I did it backwards trying to film. You see these 2 ridges on the inside here? That's what actually holds the film holders in place. So that's how you'll know. You can't set it up wrong because it'll tell you. But here, you can see now, the ridges on both sides will accept our film holders. And you load with the tabs opposite sides so that they're easy to grab. And now, we have these baffles here. And the point of the baffles is you'll see that the patterns are offsetting. So when you put them together, you can't see through them. So fluid can still pass through because there's going to be a space in between them, but light cannot. So once these are dropped in, the fluid's going to enter on this side, and it passes through the baffles in the spacer and is able to get to your film to develop your film. But light obviously can't. So if there were film loaded on these holders, you close the lid, again lining up our two tabs, and that's how we know our lid is on correctly. Pull it all the way closed so that the O-ring can seal. And now we have a light-proof box. We can go ahead and turn on the lights and develop the film from here. But before we do that, I just want to show you how easy it is, because again, if you've never done this, you may be intimidated. I'm just going to show you how easy it is to load this. I have my film holder here, and I have my film, so I'll just go ahead and close my eyes, cover my eyes with my hat if I can. Alright, so the first thing that First thing I want to do is I feel for the top of the film holder, and I do that by feeling for this tab. So there's a tab on the top, not on the bottom, and we want to load from the top. So the second thing that I do is I feel all the way around the edges of my film, and I'm looking for these edges here, which tell me that if they're in the top right corner, then I know my emulsion is facing up. If they're flipped 180 degrees, then I know my emulsion is still facing up if these are in the bottom left corner. But because I like to do everything the exact same way every time and develop sort of that muscle memory, I always load film both in the holders and for development in the top right corner. So I'm always feeling here, and then I rearrange my film to get to the top right corner. And then the next step is that these are offsetting tabs. So you have 4 tabs on each side, and then the left or the right will be higher. And in this case, the tab on the left is higher than the tab on the right. So I'm going to put my middle finger on the tab on the right and my index finger on the tab on the left. And then I'm just going to bring the film, I would never do it like this close to my body, but for the sake of filming, I'm just going to bring the film to my fingers, and then I'm going to use my fingers to just make sure that they go under those first 2 tabs. Once they go under the tabs, I just keep my fingers on the leading edge and gently push on that corner, making sure that I'm going under each tab. And if I get stuck at any point, I just lightly wiggle. And then as I get to the edge, I should feel that tab on the back, and I do. So then my check is I go all the way around the edge feeling for the back tab, which I have. And then I feel for 4 tabs on the left side, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm looking for the plastic tabs. I'm trying not to touch the emulsion, but staying my finger on the plastic. And then I look for 4 tabs on the right, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I rub my finger along this leading edge to make sure that the film is not protruding. And that's how I know that the film has been loading properly. Now, as I'm loading, if I start to feel one of these corners push up against my finger, then I know I'm on top of one of the tabs. And the reason you don't want to do that is I'm going to go ahead and force that here. Is if you get on top of a tab, the film's going to slide in real easy and it's going to feel like you did a good job. But you'll notice it won't stop because you're going to go up over the edge. And even if you do catch this back edge here, what's going to happen is because you don't have those tabs here, when you go to agitate the tank, this is going to be shaking around, and what's going to happen is the film's going to pop out and it's going to get damaged. So you want to make sure that you get it underneath all the tabs on the holder. This is ridiculous. Okay, so as you can see, that really isn't that hard, and it's much harder holding it like this. To be honest, I loaded a couple sheets, so I had some practice before I did this, but even the first couple times you do it, it's very simple. I would practice in the daylight with some sheets of film that are discarded. These are discarded because I accidentally opened a film holder and thought there were no film in it, and there was. So I have several sheets to practice with, and anytime before I develop, I'll always load 5 or 6 sheets in the light, and then I'll put the practice sheets in the film tent or wherever I'm going to be loading them, and I will practice in the dark as well, because you don't want to practice all that in the daylight and then you get in the dark and it's 100 times harder. So a couple of dry runs in the light, a couple of dry runs in the dark, and you'll be good to go. It's very simple. And this is what it looks like when it's been loaded. So there's your bottom tab that you want to make sure you hit. Otherwise you might get stuck on this bottom part and feel like you've gone all the way. But if you feel the tab and there's no film underneath it, then you haven't gone far enough. You need to wiggle until you get to that bottom tab. And you can see right here, I was on top of it, now I'm below it. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs on the right side, 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs on the top, and our film is flush with the top. So we are good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and load in the real film and then drop it in the tank. Okay. So we have our tank loaded here. It took me about 4 minutes to load 2 sheets of film, which is horrendous. Believe it or not, where I struggled the most was getting the film holders back into the canister. I kept going in at an angle. So I didn't practice that part, so maybe worthwhile to do a dry run on the entire process and not just loading the film onto the holders. But even still, 4 minutes, not horrible. I haven't done this in about 1.5 years using this tank, so a little rusty. But now that we have the film in here, you can see we got the lights back on, we've got our caps on, and we're just gonna put this to the side. So now what I wanna do is I wanna mix up our chemistry. Okay, so I have all of my chemistry laid out here, and what I like to do is lay everything out in the sink so that I can make sure I don't have any cross-contamination. So the first thing I like to measure and mix is my developer. In this case, it'll be the Pyrocat HD. This is in a 1:1:100 ratio. So it'll be 1 milliliter of part A, 1 milliliter of part B, and then 100 milliliters of distilled water. In our case, because we're going to fill the tank with 500 milliliters, I do 500 milliliters distilled water and then 5 milliliters each of parts A and parts B. I like to use these little plastic syringes that I bought off of Amazon to measure out the parts A and B. What I do is I just fill the lid. So I take each one, I shake them up before using, I open them up, and then I just pour a little bit of the fluid directly into the lid. And then using the syringe, I just take up about 8 milliliters. And then I put all the excess back into the bottle, and then I'll go ahead and pour the part A into our measuring container, and then I'll do the same for part B. And then I'm going to take my 500 milliliters of water, clean stirring utensil, and then I just gently stir. Now it's normal to see a light amber color, and it'll darken a little bit as you mix, and that's perfectly normal. Now I'll go ahead and measure out 500 milliliters of distilled water as our stop bath. When using Pyrocat HD, you can use water instead of an acetic acid stop bath. And then for fixer, I'll be using Ilford's Rapid Fix in a 100 to 400 milliliter combination, giving us 500 total milliliters. I have my 100 milliliters of fixer mixed out here. I'll go ahead and combine this with 400 milliliters of water, and then we're ready to go ahead and get started. Once your chemistry is mixed, you need to know what temperature you're developing at. So the advantage of black and white film is that it's not as sensitive to temperature as, say, color negative or slide film. However, you still need to know what temperature you're at, because that's going to determine how long you need to develop for. So what I like to do is use this sous vide machine in a bucket of water. I set the temperature to 75, and then it's going to keep the temperature right there for me. And then I put my chemistry in these wine bottles, which I label with what's going to be inside them. I put that in the water with a stopper, and I let it sit for 15 or 20 minutes. Usually what I'll do is I'll mix my chemistry, drop it in the water so that I can get to the right temperature right before I right before I load my film. So while I'm loading the film, the chemistry is getting to the temperature. I use a thermometer to drop into the bottle, and this way I know when the actual chemistry has hit the temperature. Just because the water is at the right temperature, it might take the chemistry a little while to catch up. So this is the process that I use, but if you don't want to spend the $100 on a machine and you just want to use your ambient temperature, that's fine. As long as the temperature in the room is relatively stable, you can measure the temperature of the chemistry and then adjust your development from there. Okay, we have all of our chemistry mixed and our developer's at the right temperature. I like to leave everything out in order that I'll use it so that I can't screw it up. We got developer, H2O for stop bath, fix, and then our photo flow. So now all that's left to do, I'm going to go ahead and remove the fill drain cap. I'm going to pour in my developer, and I'm going to hit my foot switch to start the timer as soon as I start pouring. I'm going to go ahead and tighten both of my lids. And then I'm going to agitate for the first 30 seconds. And to agitate, I slowly invert the tank, just using my wrists. And the goal here is to get the entire surface of the film coated in fresh chemistry, but you're not trying to introduce a bunch of air bubbles. So you just slowly invert. And then after about 30 seconds, gently tap to release all the bubbles, anything that does get caught on the film. And then for every minute I do 15 seconds of inversions, which at my speed is about 4 inversions. So when we hit the 1 minute mark, I'm going to invert 4 more times. Couple gentle taps, and I'm going to continue this process for 10 minutes. And after our 10 minutes, pour water stop bath directly in. And for this part, I'm going to just continuously agitate the tank for 1 full minute. And now we'll go ahead and enter our fix. And just like with the developer, we're going to agitate for the first 30 seconds and then 4 agitations every minute. Now fix is not one shot. You can use it until it's exhausted, but once it's exhausted, you can't just pour it down the drain like you can your developer. Most municipalities won't allow this because it does have silver in the fix. So what you're going to need to do is check the rules where you live, but for me, I store it in large gallon jars, and then once I have about 5 gallons, I bring it to a local waste disposal and they take care of it for me. With our film now fixed, it's safe to remove the lid. And now what's left is to rinse. My rinsing technique, I like to fill the tank completely, let it run for 30 seconds, pour it out, let it fill, run for 30 seconds, pour it out. And I like to dump out the water at least 5 times over a 10 to 12 minute period. Once our film is washed, I like to take 500 milliliters of distilled water and then 1 milliliter of photo flow for every 200 milliliters. So in our case, it'll be 2.5 milliliters of photo flow. I put that in the distilled water, gently stir it. We're not trying to shake it because it's like a detergent and it'll bubble up on you. And then I just pour it directly over the film, no agitation, just pour it over. I let the film sit for about 60 seconds, and then I will pour this out, and then our film is ready to hang. Now there's no correct way to hang the film. I like to use these holders, which are actually meant for stand development. I like them because there's no way to drop the film. I've used plastic, I've used wooden holders. Anytime I clip to the corner, if I don't put a hole in it with one of those clips that puts a hole, there's a risk that it'll fall. And I can't tell you how many times I come into the dark room and 1 or 2 sheets has fallen into the sink and been destroyed. With this, it's held in all 4 corners, and then I hang it on a hook just like this. There'll be no curling, it dries completely, there's holes to let all the fluid go, and I have had no issues using this method. So I would highly recommend this, but to each their own. Okay, well, I hesitated on whether or not to show you the film. I'm really unhappy with the overall image, but if you made it this far, you deserve to see what I came away with. So you can see, like I said, I shot 2 sheets here, and this was the base exposure, which is definitely underexposed. We're looking at negative, so what you see as white is really going to be black. So these shadows are really blocked out. Now this is the 1 stop higher, and I probably could have used an extra half a stop here, but I think I can salvage this. There's detail all the way throughout, so I could probably fix this in the dark room. Now in terms of sharpness, let's see if I can show you this here. Everything is sharp all the way through. You can see these pine needles here and the details in this leaf and stick. So sharpness wise, everything is good. I stopped down to f22. The problem is really just the composition. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you on the back of the ground glass what this looked like. This is where I really struggle with 4x5 especially. When I'm trying to shoot black and white, I'm not very good at pre-visualizing what the end result's going to look like. And to me, everything just looks so great on the back of a ground glass. It just pops at you and it's almost three-dimensional. I get so excited that I don't spend enough time just thinking about what's this going to look like as a flat image. And I might be a little bit too critical here. This is a negative and it might look just fine in print, but this just doesn't represent to me what I was looking at. And what this is, in case you can't tell, is this is a burned tree, and the tree is completely dead. It was burned in the recent wildfires, and the bark is actually peeling away from the wood. So this is all completely charred and is peeling away, revealing the wood underneath. And then you had some really nice soft light peeking through the clouds, illuminating the scene. So it was just a beautiful scene, and I was really happy with it. I just feel like compositionally, I would have liked to have shifted a little over this way and just sort of change the view so that I'm going more up the root. I think I just got distracted a little bit too much with these details on the side and trying to bring them into the scene, and it really just kind of pulls you away from the overall subject, which is really the char of the root. So not really happy with how I executed, but this is a scene I can go back to, so lesson learned. Alright, well that's going to do it for me this week. I know this was a long one, but we had a lot to cover. But hopefully this at least encouraged you to try developing at home. If not, convinced you that it's not for you. Hopefully there was some value in this video for you. But I would love your feedback on this video and how I can make other videos that are helpful to you in the future. Other than that, I hope you have a great weekend and get out there, make some images.